Join me, please, in welcoming that fabulous group of young men.
Never gets old. Thanks so much for joining us this week, everyone. My name is Adi Eshman.
I'm Jason Jones. Welcome everybody to Bushwick Politic.
This is a talk show where we bring you different and exciting subjects each week to talk about things that really matter for people. And this week we are really fortunate to have Elinor T Vanderburg join us to talk about theater and the future of theater. Hello, Ellie.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us. This is really, I think you're amazing. I think this is going to be such an exciting conversation. And I think one thing that we can jump off of as a discussion is your New York Times quote. Your quote in the New York Times.
It was very exciting.
To talk about the future of theater in New York City. Casual, you know.
It's this great feature. They interviewed 20 theater people. I appreciated the term theater people specifically. And just to talk about, we're in the midst of this pandemic. Broadway is not going to be coming back until 2021, January at the very earliest. And it's really just upended this whole industry from top to bottom, large and small. So in terms of what the future is, I like using the time that I've got, and I think that theaters can also be wise about this downtime right now to really take a look at their practices and just make them better for the future. Theater has been troubled for some time, and for every if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere sort of statement or saying that it's a very competitive field. It's also because there's a lot of things within the industry itself that don't there's not a lot of margin for I don't even want to say error, but for exploration, for experimentation, for risk taking, I suppose. And so while all theater companies, whether it's your Broadway, it's Cats in its 700th year, or if it's downtown, the downest of towns, experimental off Broadway theater, I feel like there's just an opportunity to re-engage with how we make theater and figure out what we're going to be doing in the future, because it's not sustainable. It's not sustainable. And even at the beginning of the pandemic, when I think all of us were sort of like, maybe there's going to be like 2 weeks of this, like we'll see if we can kind of offset this if we all just stay in our homes for 2 weeks. Even at that point, people were getting laid off because it was like, we just can't pay you beyond 2 weeks from now, and so if you're in a situation where if the world has to monumentally messed up moment in time has to stop for 14 days, but if you can't bring your people along with you, then already you have a problem. So what can we do to fix that?
Yeah. And you were quoted in the New York Times talking about some of the specific issues that theater has, and what are the things they need to work on. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, theater, my love. I love theater, and I feel like I can criticize it deeply, but yeah, I mean, the problems of systemic racism in our country are also prevalent within the stage industry, within the majority of our entertainment industries, if not all. Ableism is a major factor, and I'll get into that in a second paragraph. Sexism and misogyny have been major problems as well. White supremacy is a major issue. I mean, I don't know, you name the ism, we got it. And so how we can do better. We're storytellers. We make imaginary worlds. We try and transport people, and theater by nature is a tool to for community engagement and to deliver stories and messaging to people, and can really truly be revolutionary if people give it the opportunity. And so it's quite heartbreaking to see that there's so many of these plagues that hit our society that are also so insidious in the theater community and in the theater industry at large. When we have an opportunity, we have bigger imaginations than that. The imagination is the greatest tool that this industry has. And so but it can be redirected, and not just focusing on the text and the stories and the beautiful designs, but instead on how we are making the craft itself.
Right.
Wow. Okay, of those challenges that you just named, the racism, the sexism, what do you see, I guess, as the biggest challenge that, I mean, obviously all of these are huge challenges that, I'm sure you've experienced as, not only a person of color, but as a woman within this traditional industry. What do you see as something that we can do in the immediate future, and something that you could see us doing, I guess, sort of long term to combat these challenges?
I mean, yeah, I think in the immediate future, it's funny, the immediate future in a pandemic.
Right.
What does that mean? What
What does
month is
that
it?
mean exactly?
Is it April? Yeah. Are we
There's no more
talking?
weekends. No more
Yeah,
weekends.
yeah. Are we
Let's keep our
talking
fingers
April?
crossed for this time next year.
Yeah,
Hopefully.
2020, 2021. Like, I'm not sure, but in the now, right?
Right.
I think, and a lot of companies are doing this. Certainly, are examining. There's going to be a lot of bullet points to this. I'm not going to try and keep track of them, but like bullet point one, there's folks who are re-examining who's in positions of leaderships within their organizations, and it is by and large straight white men. And in Broadway, it's straight white men of a certain age, and so how does that affect the audience members that are coming there? How does that affect the work that is being done? How does that affect the experience of the performers and the designers who are there? I attended the Broadway for Black Lives Matters coalition event in early June, I believe.
Early June, yeah.
Yeah, which was the Broadway Advocacy Coalition is incredible. They do amazing work, and brought a lot of really amazing speakers, to share some stories. And an example that was given there was how, and one that I can certainly relate to and have seen, in various productions that I've been in, is the issue, for instance, of how to deal with a Black performer's hair, and that's something where if you're a Black performer and you have it's not okay to you should ask people before you touch them, period. But in particular, there are connotations associated with touching a Black woman's hair that are extremely awful, and we don't like it. We don't like it. And so the experience of so many Black performers who have been in spaces where someone has called out, like, oh, so, what are you going to do about that hair? Or has gone and put their hands in it. I worked on a production myself. It's been about a decade or so, where it was a cast of 5 Black individuals, and they had a great wig designer. Cookie Jordan was the wig designer, but they didn't have a stylist on hand to be able to upkeep the maintenance of the wigs. And I was brought on truly last minute, I think, for the dress rehearsal, because it was just something that the producers hadn't thought about. They just hadn't thought about. They hadn't thought about the fact that Black hair was a skill set that was outside of what they knew. To that, and so, and so we were there, and I fought for pay. I think I was offered about $100 to do, a 3-week run of a show initially.
Jesus.
And I was like, absolutely not. This is not going to be the last thing you budget. I mean, it was, but no, we're not going to act like it's the last thing you budget. It's going to be a real deal. And this also just goes into this area of reckoning. I feel growing up as not the standard neutral in America means white and male and straight, right? Like, that is what media teaches us. Anything else is left or right of that norm.
Right, it gets an identifier.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Which is ridiculous, which I think, I think it's ridiculous. I'm sure you guys think it's ridiculous too. It's messed up. But if you are not that quote unquote norm, you do what you do and you learn about other things, you know, like I know what the norm is. I'm saying this because I know what the norm is, big air quotes here. But for that reason, I am also conditioned to know what that norm probably thinks of me. And I'm not trying to put words into people's mouths or anything, but in the case of if you hear scratching right now, it's because my cat just woke up and she loves her cardboard house. FYI. Um, but you know, I know about black hair because it's my own hair, but I also have a sense that maybe a white man who's on my set might not know what I know that he doesn't know about black hair. And so it's this question of why don't we all do the same amount of research for one another? You know, why don't we investigate the things that we don't understand? And it's really shocking to see how many folks really just kind of take their position at center as the given and don't feel like there is any additional work to be done to have to understand. You know, at a retreat last summer, I was speaking to a Chinese American artist who was explaining a situation where she was sitting behind a casting table, and she mentioned that she needed to put herself in the shoes of a white performer who was presenting some kind of insensitive audition material. And we had this conversation too about like, but you know, you were able to put yourself in his shoes, or like put on that cap for a second. Who puts on that cap for the black woman in the room? Who puts on that cap for the disabled member of the production team? Who puts, you know? And so and to me, that's so much what it is. And I don't, in so many cases, I mean, I know that there are those who love theater are as diverse as the day is long for certain. But I do have a hard time believing that anyone who would sign themselves up for a life in the theater would be willfully ignorant of any of this stuff. I do think that theater makers are explorers and investigators and love their homework and love finding out new things. And so it's just this gap of reckoning there. And I think there's a lot of assumptions made by individuals that if we can just take away that assumption and really start at the baseline and forget that we know anything at all and say, okay, like what do we have to know to make everybody in the room feel as wonderful as they possibly can? That's all it takes. You know, that's all it takes. In the theater industry, it gets so wrapped up with money and ticket sales and revenue and celebrity status. But no, that's not why you got into the industry in the first place, you know? Yeah, I've gone off track.
It's beautiful.
Not at all.
It's beautiful. Not at all. No.
You've actually kind of answered some questions we were going to ask and touched on some more. The first one being, you know, within the industry, it sounds like, you know, what you're telling us is the fact that, you know, although there is a lot of diversity within theater itself, there isn't a lot of diversity within the decision-making process or those who necessarily would drive the theater. And so I'm wondering, you know, what would you see as a way to change that? Would you recommend like educating those who are currently in positions of power, or changing those people entirely and introducing more minorities within those positions within theater? And if that's the option, then how would you go about doing that in such a traditional, you know, mired industry, in the thought that, you know, the white male is the generic being for America, essentially? How would you even go about tackling that mind state?
Well, just really quickly, I think there's also the third option, which is something that has been explored historically in the Black community and also in the Asian community, which is just starting their own structure. You know, just start saying that this is white theater and we're going to start our own thing because we can't access this. So I think there's also that third option as well.
Right. Yeah. You know, and as you're saying these options, I'm just picturing, I think it was season 5 of Game of Thrones when Cersei blew up the
The
citadel or
keep,
whatever.
right,
Yeah, the
whatever
keep.
it's
Yeah, if you
called,
blow up
yeah.
the keep, you know, and I'm like, well, that's one that's one way to do it. You just blow it all up and then we'll, you know, and we'll come back around and see. But you know, if I were to do that in my own life, then you know, like Audie, I wouldn't be here. Like, you know what I mean? So what can we do that makes us the happiest? I mean, in my most in my most charged mindset, I think that those who care, we'll just call them that, within any organization, need to go to their leadership and to their staff and say, you know, this is what we're doing. Or I think that everybody should be taking facilitation training right now. I don't, you know, whomever you are, like but no matter what your company is, I think that you need to be investigating your practices and doing some facilitation training, because the world changes rapidly. And frankly, if many companies were doing this, you know, from the get-go, then we would not have, we wouldn't find ourselves in so many of these situations. But facilitation training to continue to create equitable spaces and to meet the times and your community where it's at in any given time. I think that those who are adverse to those, I think that that's a big question. And do you want to work with those folks anymore? I'm not saying that every single, you know, Broadway organization could necessarily disband itself and go and secede and go somewhere else. I'm not sure. They would have to work that out. But I would suggest rejecting working with those who are not like, let's go and do this. And I get that people have to do things in their own time. But, you know, people have to do things. This is a thing that is happening in 2020. The fact that the same reading lists are being passed around from 2016 and being like, oh, we have to read these books to talk about racism and equity. I'm like, why did you not read them in 2016? You had 4 years. What are we talking about right now? And so at that point, I'm kind of like, I do not trust that you will read them now either. So what is this Instagram feed? Like, prove it to me. Prove it to me through your actions. And until then, like, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. So that's kind of where I'm at with that. And it's really at the point of like, if you're not going to help, then just like, please get out of the way, because there's so many people who are going to be heard at this point. And I do definitely see the value in creating safe spaces and new systems. I think it's very important. Actually, I think it's crucial that everybody be able to create their organizations from within their own cultures and create their own set of practices. In the great American experiment, the ideal would be that all of those practices would be able to come together and that we could all learn from them, that there would not be this sort of hierarchy or delineation of like, well, that's Black theater way, and this is theater way. Oh, Audie, I actually wanted to ping on that too. In terms of ableism, also,
yes, I was actually going to ask you about that.
You know, there is certainly a distinction between theater and deaf theater, and so much of that has to do with the reality of what is prioritized in you know, in the hearing theater world, and even the way that it's taught. You know, I grew up, I studied theater at New York University, and in a very, you know, just kind of learned in terms of the 4 main design elements. We've got set design, we've got costume design, we've got lighting design, we've got sound design. And sound design, of course you're going to have sound design, of course. But that wasn't even taught in a way that was taking into consideration an entire population of individuals who are deaf or hard of hearing. Lighting design was not taken into consideration in a way that is addressing blind individuals, non-seeing individuals. And so, you know, and that is what creates those barriers at an educational level. And so when you look at that, it's like, yeah, of course you need to have realms where people can make the work they want to do. And those communities have to create work in the way they see it in order to influence the overall norm. Because I can't, you know, I could not create a theater piece for deaf audiences in a vacuum,
Mhm.
nor would a white theater producer be able to create a piece about the Black experience in a vacuum without having other, Black folks there. And this, what I'm saying feels very obvious, but I just, it feels
Not
very
to all,
obvious.
not to all white theater makers.
What?
I said not to all white theater makers.
Maybe not, maybe not, maybe not. For
Yeah,
me,
yeah.
I'm like, what are we talking about? But
Right.
yeah, so yes, I do think it's very important for communities to be able to do that, and also it's also just crucial for others to engage with those communities, because when February, okay, February, you want to go and see a Black show? Chances are you can find one in the month of February. Well, how about if I want to see one in August? Like, can it not have that umbrella and be this one monolithic thing? Because at that point, society would be able to open itself up, and there could be this kind of cross pollination of ideas and understanding that would then do what theater does best, which is to show people new worlds and change the way that they see their world around them, and make it a better place. To put a nice little bow on that.
Yeah. Yeah.
That sounds like a great idea. How would you encourage making it happen?
Oh, Lord.
Sorry, not to overload you.
No. I mean, I feel like, behind the door is like my special guest money bags over here. Like, it's always money. Like, everyone's like, we need money. We need money to make it. It's true. There's, people don't take risks because of funding. People are like, but the subscribers, but the marketing, like, but we're not going to trek up to 125th Street, like all this crap. It's crap. So how to make it happen? People should just do it. People should just do it and not be just do the right thing. Just do the right thing. Just do the right thing. Do the type of work that you want to see in the world, and think about the fact that the world is vast and broad, and think about the person who is most opposite from you, and what do they want to see and what do they need to see, and how can you create that? How can you make theater that really makes a change and makes an impact?
Mm-hmm.
I was walking along, I was going up, I guess it was Broadway or 7th Avenue. I know locations, I'm bad at my street names, but passed by the Winter Garden, where they've got all the signage up for the Music Man. And look, I love Hugh Jackman, but I was like, why? And maybe I'll be pleasantly surprised. Maybe it's going to be like a radical adaptation of Hugh Jackman. Something tells me not. But at this moment, I'm like, I know that they made this decision like 3 years ago, but like, do we need this right now? And maybe the answer is no. Maybe Hugh Jackman should be like, should do something else instead. Maybe they're having a meeting about it right now, and they're like, yo, it's 2020. How can we make this relevant for when we open next year? And that's also really great. I mean, I just say you got to make it happen. I hope right now that our civilization is at a moment where it realizes that shit is sour. I cursed. Is that okay? I did.
That's all right. Yeah.
Yeah. I hope it realizes that we are at a moment when we cannot turn back. We can't go back to the way things were. So that kind of means we can do anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
So why wouldn't we want to do the thing that answers this anguished call of so many people who have been historically left behind in the world and in this industry? Why not? Why wouldn't you? That's what I ask people who are unwilling to make the change. Like, why not?
Yeah. And I think that there's like this moment of hope in what you're saying. Also, is like this idea that there's so much that's been revealed to be broken, so much that in so many ways, like you're saying, like we can't go back to not seeing these things as a community, and to revert back to, let's say, the old ways or the normal way of doing business from before the pandemic. Feels like a real loss. It feels like a loss of opportunity, and it feels like even more damaging than how things are going, during the normal way of doing things. So I don't have a point there. It's just something that I was noticing in what you're saying.
No, it's true. I do, despite all of my rage, I am still quite hopeful, actually. And I do think that there is a lot of room for growth and development with all this. It's really true. But yeah, exactly. It would be like going back to an old lover who's like, hey, we broke up, but like things are going to be different. And then things aren't different. And you're like, this sucks because we had another chance. We got together, we missed each other. We had another chance to make it right and you blew it. And so let's not blow it.
Yeah. Yeah. Was there anything else about
It's
ableism
really interesting
that you wanted to talk about? Oh, sorry, Jason, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it's really interesting that what both of you guys are saying. It's funny how the kind of point that the theater industry is at is also the point that a lot of industries and a lot of practices within our society are kind of at. Our politics as a whole are at a point where we really can't go back to the way things were because, you know, obvious corruptions have now been exposed, you know, and it's really interesting. I found it a kind of funny parallel when you were talking about how within the theater industry, it's usually representative of mostly white males because those are the people making the decisions, yet those aren't all the people who enjoy the theater nor participate in the theater. And I found that kind of interesting. I was like, sounds kind of like our wannabe democracy. You know,
Yeah.
it's very interesting. So, I mean, given that we are at a pivotal moment within the theater industry, I guess in an ideal world, where would you like to see the changes being made? Obviously, like more representation, but can you expand upon that? Like, how does theater look post-pandemic, you know, if the changes that you'd like to be made were instilled?
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I think there would be there would need to be an emphasis on new stories. I think that theater is wonderful when it serves a community, for certain. To be able to create some sort of symbiosis within the the location in which a theater piece is performed, or a group that potentially the theater piece represents. I think that having really getting everybody in an organization on board to to be there. Like, it's not the type of thing where like marketing director drops in week 12 and is like, okay, what are we doing here? What do I need to do? No, like, let's get that marketing director in at the very beginning. And so this piece can be built from the ground up. Audie, we met through Fresh Ground Pepper, which is the arts incubation company that I co-run with 4 other creative directors. And that company focuses on the incubation and development of new work, nascent projects. We always say that we want the project that everybody else thinks is too wild and too out there and too unmarketable to be able to do. We want that idea. We want that really wild idea, and again, I think that the reason that people don't take risks on those projects is because they're like, gosh, like, are people going to like it? But to really be with those projects from the ground up and to see the inner workings of the writers and the directors and the collaborators and the performers that are there, and to be able to be in rooms where those conversations are happening and the development of the piece, and see how it changes and seeing how it's influenced by current events and having that dialogue just consistent. I think that would be so great. There's so many, there's so many, I met an actor in an audition process several years ago who really opened my eyes to like going to EPAs and like going on calls and being a union like real Broadway actor, and I shouldn't say real Broadway actor, but I just mean that I mean personally myself, I've never been on EPA. I'm as far away from union as one could get. So
just for the audience, what's an EPA?
I don't even know what it stands for,
okay.
To be totally honest. Can you tell me?
I don't know what it stands for either, but is it like equity something auditions?
Yeah.
Equity posting auditions?
Maybe the P is for person. I don't know.
Equity
Anybody
person
knows?
auditions.
Drop that.
Drop it into the chat. Yeah.
Yes, truth. I do not know, and that is how far removed from it. Don't at me. But
Sure.
he is a great. His role is the dad one from Mamma Mia, and so I guess that's the role he gets. And so they can have a touring company of Mamma Mia, and he will, audition and be like, I played Dad 1 in Mamma Mia in this tour. And they're like, great, we're going to bring you on for Dad 1 in this tour of Mamma Mia. And then the track and the character, do it. And ain't nothing wrong with that. But it also, does that limit the opportunity to explore the part if people are just kind of getting moved from, box here over to box here and everything?
Right.
I don't, I'm not trying to throw out all, thank you, Drew Vanderburg. I'm not trying to throw it's equity principle audition.
We're gonna edit it, so you're just gonna say that.
Yes.
I was kidding. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm not saying that we can never do Mamma Mia again. I'm not saying that we can't do the old works again. I'm just saying, can we do them within the context of now? Can we? That would be nice, because there's potentially still lessons to be gleaned from, what is Showboat in 2020? I do not know. I don't know if I need to know, but it could be something. It doesn't mean that we have to burn the whole history of stage arts here. But it does call for this investigation it calls for that investigation. It also, in terms of what I would love to see, is just a shift in how people are making work. I think that, I think that we have so this sense of time, time is money, and it's all about time, and don't waste my time, and if you don't have the time, we'll replace you, and you're replaceable, and there's always going to be someone else, and the show must go on. It's all so white supremacist. It's all just so wrapped up in this idea of capitalism that I do not care about. It is not the point of theater. It is not. And so when and it's about rejecting that. I encountered, in casting a musical several years ago, I encountered many performers who, at the audition process, were surprised, had not, in an entire calendar year, had not been to an audition where there was a person of color behind the table, meaning me, in 80 auditions that they'd been on. And so, boo. And two, were amazed that they were encouraged to speak up about their beliefs in the audition room, because they had been taught to not have that identity, to not let that identity show because of concerns for casting. Because if your casting director sees that you have posted an incendiary post on your Instagram feed about the president, you might be deemed as difficult to work with or too problematic. And so, I think that musical theater people in particular, get a really bad rap for being very smiley and dancy and everything. And just, and I realized that it's actually been the industry that's been kind of poisoning the sense of identity that people can have, because folks don't feel like that belongs in the room. And it absolutely does. I have a great shirt from a company called Prink Shop. It says the personal is political. And I completely agree. Yes, the personal is political. It's how can you do anything if you're just putting your own personhood aside? That is your experience. That is your special gift to the world. That is a framework. That is a lens of reckoning that you are bringing to the table that is unique, that you can offer to that production. And God, any production that casts anybody should want to have that person's whole wonderful, beautiful self there. Otherwise, what are you doing? Why are you bringing people onto? Why aren't you just writing? Go write a book. Go write a book. Books are awesome. I love books, but go do something that's not collaborative. I believe that if you are in a space with a person, you do have a responsibility to that person as your fellow human. So be responsible to them and allow them to be themselves. Don't try and put them in a little box or whatever. So I think it would be that. And a lot of that has to do with to get back to my about time, it has to do with allowing individuals to have the time to do things. So much of the problem here is about rush. Rush, rush, rush. Everyone is rushing all the time. The pandemic has allowed for um, this slowdown where so many people I've spoken to over the course of the last 6 months are like, I'm breathing and I'm anxious, but I'm also recognizing the things that matter to me, that I care about, the areas that I want to put my energy into. I see better, I feel better where my energies are being reflected back at me. And if that were to happen in the theater world, so many amazing stories could come to life. If it's not a matter of like, we just have to get right to rehearsal because we've only got 2 weeks left to the show. Well, okay, but like check in, like, I don't know, schedule a longer rehearsal if you can. Okay, and then it comes to money, and I am the wrong person to ask about how we're going to do anything with money. I'm the wrongest of people to ask about money at this particular phase of things. But you know, I think for the time being, I mean, I'm not saying that my theater people should continue to work for peanuts, but let's put it this way. If the performers are working for peanuts, then the directors and the producers and the designers should be working for peanuts too. Just keep it equitable, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. A big discussion in the theater community is, you know, this, and I think definitely the pandemic moment and the Black Lives Matter movement has changed this discussion to a certain extent, but the discussion about how the money is made in theater is working in an administration, and how, you know, that's the way to make a middle class living in theater, not by making it, not by thinking about it, by being an administrator in it. I remember this question was posed to Oscar Eustis, and he just sort of he was able to talk about it. He was able to say, like, and for those who don't know, Oscar Eustis is the artistic director of the Public Theater. He was able to talk about it and say, like, yeah, this is a trend that's been happening since the 70s, similar to like how inequality has been widening since the 70s anyway. You know, CEOs make so much more than their workers, et cetera, et cetera. Administrators are the highest paid people in theater. And, you know, you have actors, like you were saying, who work for $100 for 3 weeks. And then you have administrators who can make $200,000-$300,000 a year, you know? And so this is, I guess what's interesting to me is, like, this is not unique to theater, but because theater is what we'd like to say, it's like an inherently democratic institution. I think this is going to be one of the conversations that'll have to happen. And that will include loss. That includes, I mean, to change that issue, it includes people making less money.
Yeah. No, exactly. And, you know, I think about my time in university, and when I was in school, we were very discouraged from saying that you know, if you're a writer and a director and a performer and a designer, pick one, two at the most, you know, don't let them know, you know, because what it probably means is that you don't do all of them well. And I'm really grateful and impressed in the last couple of years that I feel like the multi-hyphenate is something that is like valued very, you know, very greatly. And so I think it's important to be able to wear many hats. I think that many hat wearing is what makes us better global citizens and better humans, and just to, you know, we have greater empathy to one another because we can put ourselves in those shoes, and we can you know, rewire our thinking a little bit. So to that end, in terms of administration, I hope, I mean, I'm not saying that everybody like wants to, you know, hang up their tap shoes and go and become a theater administrator part-time during the off season. I'm not saying that, but I do think that the gatekeeping aspect of the theater industry is something like the gates just need to come down, because you know, it's because we can do it all. We can make it happen. And so the idea that anybody is making so much more money than anybody else, it's normally just wrapped up in like history and connections at this point, for an individual. So, you know, but that same tap dancer could like become the theater administrator for the next for the next project, theoretically, you know? And so, yeah, that's not a revolutionary idea necessarily, but I do think that everyone really does have the power to do anything. And so, and it's only those who are afraid of ceding their power who would encourage otherwise.
Beautiful.
That's very interesting you say that, because that kind of also draws a parallel to, you know, what's going on right now within our political system. You see a small minority group really, you know, taking charge where they shouldn't, and exercising their power in ways that affect everyone. That being said, you know, with these changes and where the future of theater is going, I mean, within the political realm, obviously when we see some changes that we need to make, you know, that's what voting is for. Within theater, what do you do? I mean, you guys, is there any kind of, I'm not within the theater realm, so I wouldn't know. Is there some kind of theater body which you can go and consult,
but
which
Jason,
would make these changes?
Right. But that's the beauty, is that you are within the theater realm. I mean, have you seen a show?
You've seen plays together, right?
Amazing. Yeah, then you're there.
I've seen your place.
Yeah. Then boom, welcome. You know, you are very much you're very much part of all of it in that case. I mean, I believe in the voting with your dollars. Where do you want to, like, who are you giving your money to? Whose tickets are you buying? Whose companies are you subscribing to? And I do think that I mean, at least at the level of theater I work in, I see that people are they take their feedback very seriously, you know? And so if you're like, this is not the type of stories I want to see, people are going to be having like an existential crisis, being like, what does Jason Jones want to see? Like, Jason Jones wrote to us, and like, how can we make work that's going to excite Jason Jones, you know? And a lot of it, yeah, it is very democratized in that way. It's and I think it requires people to speak up, for sure, and say, it's very easy, I'm guilty of this, to like skittle out of a show and be like, I didn't like it, and that's just like it, you know, and I never think of it again. But to actually take power into my own hands and be like, here's some issues I had, this is what I would love to see in the future. People can morph and evolve. And if you are subscribed to a company that is putting out work that is just not resonating with you, it's not resonating with the times, then, like, you know, send that letter, take your dollars elsewhere, see, and explore. There's so many different types of work out there that, and we only, anything, I guarantee, like, anything that you're seeing, any mailing lists that are coming, not mailing lists, mailers that are coming in to introduce news, it's only the tip of the iceberg of the work that's actually out there. So in a moment of pandemic, where we are all in boxes and on screens and everything, it's actually I find it very liberating, because I can tune into different shows that I wouldn't necessarily have known about, or I would have known about too late. Or, you know, how many times have you been like, oh, that show sounds really interesting, but the reviewer only heard about it and saw it on Thursday, and so now they're only writing about it on Saturday, and I read this on Sunday at noon, but the show's at 2 and I've already got brunch plans. So it's like, you know, you're not gonna do it. But now I can be like, oh, let me just pop up my Zoom screen and like see what's going on here, and that's really exciting. And so I hope that as much as Zoom theater has felt like a mitigating balm to what we are all hoping to get back to really quickly, I think it is kicking like hell beneath the surface, because it is enabling people to do work that isn't like 6 months of my life and now our one Zoom permit, you know, like, you know, you're able to, it can be done more quickly. You know, God bless anybody who is doing a 7-hour show on Zoom. That's really awesome, but we can have smaller doses of shows, which in itself feels very exciting and radical, just because, you know, how do you get people to a 20-minute play? You know, there's no 20-minute Broadway shows. Could be cool, but it's not going to happen. I predict maybe it will now. And also you, I mean, I'm sure that this is untrue in some cases, but you are those who are participating in Zoom performance. If I'm an actor in a Zoom show, guess what? I'm also the set designer and the costume designer and the lighting designer too. And so being able to flex all of those muscles to give me agency over my own production, that and there has to be that collaboration. There's no me being like, oh, yes, oh, over here, I have to be like, there's a wall here, I can't go back any further, why don't we do this instead? And so it's allowing people again just to take agency over their work more. And I hope that the exercise of people's creative voices when we get back into the physical space then allows them to take that, to be able to exercise that when they are in a room with other collaborators. But I do think it's been quite empowering for people who maybe were not in the position where they were creating their own work previously, to be able to do it maybe for the first time, and see what comes out of it. I find that very exciting.
Yeah. Where do you hear about Zoom theater? Where do you get the news from?
Oh my goodness. A little bit of everywhere. I mean, I am very fortunate to be a part of an incredible network of artists with Fresh Ground Pepper, also with She NYC, which is an organization in its 6th year now that promotes gender parity in the arts. They throw a festival. They did an awesome, for instance, they did an incredible 3-city digital festival between the months of July and August in New York and LA and Atlanta. And typically I would have seen all of the New York City shows, but probably wouldn't have been in LA to see them and wouldn't have been in Atlanta where they started this year. But I got to watch every single one this year and see all of these fantastic female identifying writers and directors just let their voice be heard. And it was such a broad range. And so I'm part of that network. I work with Exquisite Corpse Company, which also has an amazing roster of artists who, have come through its doors. And, I'm part of the writers group and stuff. And so I'm working with great folks there as well. And then, I don't know. I mean, this phone of mine, who knows where it takes me, and I find links and stuff. I'm a mile a minute on my phone, always scrolling. But certainly word of mouth, Instagram. I follow a lot of hashtags on Instagram, and I go looking for it, but not. Yeah, I go looking for it.
Yeah. I've struggled to find a lot of Zoom theater. I struggled to be in the know about what's good to watch these days.
Yeah, I mean, it's also, I also feel like there are a lot of performances. It is true. I was saying earlier that you might not get to the Sunday matinee closing night performance because you only heard about it on a Saturday. I will say that there's a lot of performances where it's like one night only. And so if you're not going to get it, but I think just working with a lot of folks, I have it's a nice opportunity, and they'll be like, oh yeah, I'm trying this crazy new experiment. Come check it out. It's just going to be, 45 minutes Sunday at 7, tune in, which is great. But yeah, I don't know, Adi, I'll think about this and I'll send you links in the future.
Thank you so much. We only have a few more minutes, but does anyone who's watching right now have any questions for Ellie?
Any questions?
Jason?
No. Well, you kind of answered the last question I had for you, Ellie. Just how do you see technology really affecting the industry, and if it's a good or bad thing? Obviously, you feel like it's a good thing, right? Because it really drives creativity during this crazy time.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Susan. That's so kind. Yeah, I think that it is I don't want to say a mistake to label digital theater as theater. I mean, you can call it whatever you want to. And do you enjoy it? Did it bring you joy? Awesome. But I think it's a different thing. I think there's a lot of similar sensibilities. I don't think it's film, and I don't think it's theater exactly. I don't mind either way. But I do think it is helping. I think it's helping a lot. And I think it is just forcing people to think about the art that they make in new ways. And I also think that there is a much more palpable or proximal consideration of the audience experience, which is something that I always go back to in the theater company that I co-run with my partner Drew Vanderburg, who's here tonight.
Mm-hmm.
Y'all, there was a siren. I apologize.
No, that's all right.
I thought that was my neighborhood.
No,
I think you both live in the same neighborhood.
Yeah, I was like, where are you? This was going down Flushing Avenue. Maybe you're also going to Flushing Avenue. I'm not sure. But Underlords is the company I run with my husband, Drew. And, you know, one of our questions is always, you know, what is the experience of the audience member? You know, we want to be able to sit there and see how we're going to be viewing the work. Okay, now there's some sweet R&B jams going by. Sorry, it's Thursday night bumping over here.
Yeah.
And so I think it forces people to look at the work that they're making, because they also have like been through the whole, I'm looking at a Zoom screen for half of my life now. They're like, okay, but what's actually going to be exciting if I'm doing a 45-minute thing on a Sunday night for Zoom? You have to be considerate of your audience in that way. And how do you give them an exciting experience that they can walk away with and be, you know, super delighted by?
Yeah. Thank you, Drew. So Drew just posted a list of online theater that's happening right now.
Awesome.
Yeah. Ellie, this was amazing. Thank you so much.
This was amazing. I'm so honored to be able to speak to both of you about this, and I love what y'all are doing, and you know, I love theater. Believe in theater. I still believe in theater, and you should too. But truly, thank you for having me, because I live and breathe and sleep and dream this question.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I mean, just from you listing all your different commitments, it's just so amazing that we got to speak with you tonight. And, you know, we've been able to have some really exciting conversations in Bushwick Politic. We've spoken to filmmakers who are looking at questions of reparations. We've spoken with people who are organizing hospital workers on the ground in LA. And we're just really excited to continue having these conversations going forward.
Yes, thank you so much for joining us, Ellie. We really, really appreciate it. It's good to know, you know, that there's still a fighting chance for theater and a fighting chance for there to be some good, positive change.
Oh yeah.
We need more representation.
Oh yeah. Oh, we are. It's on the ups. The best is yet to come.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for joining in.
Thank you. Thank you, Audie and Jason.
Bye.
Bye.